Spider-Man No Way Home might just be the most amazing Spider-Man. Let's talk about why. With Spider-Man's identity now revealed, Peter asks Doctor Strange for help. When a spell goes wrong, dangerous foes from other worlds start to appear, forcing Peter to discover what it truly means to be Spider-Man. Now, in unconventional fashion, I'm going to kick off this review with a spoiler alert because I simply can't not talk about spoilers in this review. So if you haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home, go check it out. Come back here, check out the review and tell me all about it in the comment section below. But if you have seen it, stick around and let's talk about Spider-Man No Way Home because as I mentioned already, personally I think it's pretty damn amazing. Amazing Spider-Man, that was the name of Andrew Garfield's movie, see? That was terrible. Where do you begin with this one? There's so much happened in it. And now it's a Marvel movie and everybody goes, MCU, boring. I've said it a lot. I'm pretty bored with it. But this one seems different. Spider-Man is different. For me, the three most iconic superheroes of all time, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. They're the three most iconic for me. They're the three I think that are the most household names. Even if you don't like superheroes, you know Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. And for me, that makes Spider-Man MCU's most valuable property. And maybe this movie just hits different if you've grown up with all the movies. You've seen the Tobey Maguire movies, forgot his name for a moment, Andrew Garfield movies, which I wasn't a big fan of, and then the Tom Holland movies, almost forgot his name too. But we've had a lot of iterations of Spider-Man in a short space of time. In fact, when Tom Holland was announced as a new Spider-Man in the MCU, my immediate thought was it's too soon after The Amazing Spider-Man to surely have another Spider-Man genre. It's just gonna flop. And Tom Holland at the time I felt was too young for the role. He just seemed like a bad fit, although they did say they were going for a younger version of Spider-Man. And I have to say I was completely wrong at the time because it's worked out fantastically. In my opinion, at the moment, Tom Holland has been the best iteration of Spider-Man. Big claim, but I think it's fairly accurate. I think a lot of people would agree with that. Forgetting about the stuff he's done in the Avengers movies, the standalone Spider-Man movies within the MCU have all been solid movies. Homecoming was pretty damn good. Far From Home was the second one, I believe. I only watched that fairly recently, just a couple of weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. I was glued to the screen all the way through. And this one, No Way Home, was a movie I had huge expectations for. And when that happens, I'm normally disappointed. But with this one, I just found myself amazed at times, just glued to the screen, couldn't peel my eyes away, and time just whizzed by as I enjoyed this movie. Now let's talk more specifics about No Way Home because it's been fairly general so far. To kick it off, right where we left off with Far From Home. Peter's identity is revealed. That was in the post-credits scene, so you know, if you for some reason left during an MCU movie credits scene, you didn't see that, okay, that's your loss. You probably would have been pretty confused if you hadn't seen the post-credits sequence. The first point right off the bat you've got to talk about with this Spider-Man movie is the cast, because the cast is the culmination of three different movie franchises come together, leading to an unbelievable cast. Let alone Tom Holland, Zendaya, and everybody else associated with the MCU version. We could go for days with that one. You also got Alfred Molina in there, Willem Dafoe pops up, Jamie Foxx pops up, and we get all these really cool superheroes and super villains, and it all mashes together, and the cast is just unbelievable when you look at it. When you go through IMDb and all the different actors, it's like, holy flip. And normally when they get that many great actors together for like, say, New Year's Eve or some of those shit films that have these amazing ensemble casts, the movie's ultimately let down because they focus so much on the casting, or most of the money went on the casting rather than everything else. That's not the case here. The cast is fantastic and overall the movie is fantastic. With everybody trying to outdo each other and get their moment in the sun, it seems, in this movie. So I can't go through every scene in the movie, but obviously there's some scenes that hit really hard and are really good in the movie. And I always say good movies need that one really good scene to really grab you. And I always think with Oscar winners, this isn't going to be an Oscar winner, I'm not saying that at all, but I always think that Oscar winners are Oscar nominees. And again, I'm not saying this is going to be an Oscar winner or Oscar nominee, but those movies, they all have that one really big scene that sticks with you for years after you've watched the movie. And I think this movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, has one of those scenes. And that scene is the scene where Aunt May is killed. But that scene was so well done. You've got Green Goblin in there, who they establish as the biggest badass throughout this movie. But Tom Holland really gets to show what a great actor he is, the emotion he puts in there. It feels like he really does hurt in this scene. Marissa Tomei, of course, no one needs to say how good an actress she is. everybody knows it. But the build up to the scene where it looks like she's okay and then all of a sudden it starts to go wrong and it dawns on Tom Holland as the SWAT team roll in. He doesn't really have the time to stay with her, but this big character, this person who's been so huge in his life, a pillar of his life, is now gone. And the scene is done so well. It's one of the best deaths in the MCU, in my opinion. And it's so hard hitting for both the character and the audience, I think. They do it really, really well. It's not like, well, Uncle Ben gets killed off in the first 5 minutes of every Spider-Man movie. You just know the next time they make a Spider-Man franchise, because it's going to happen again within the next 10 years at some point, they'll just kill off Uncle Ben in the first 5 minutes, and then it won't have the same impact. Whereas this one is the third movie. We've seen Aunt May all the way through. She's had the whole thing with Happy as well. And now this one kind of hits a bit harder. And of course, within the movie, as I mentioned already, we got Green Goblin in there. We all kind of knew that all the villains were going to pop up. We didn't necessarily know that all of the villains were going to pop up, like the lizard guy from Amazing Spider-Man #1, who I think is the weakest of all the villains. We knew Doc Ock was going to pop up. We knew Green Goblin was going to pop up. So those weren't major surprises. And of course, they kind of did a crappy job of keeping it secret that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire were coming back. As much as they tried to keep a lid on it, there was a trailer at some point that was leaked a while ago, which featured the 3 Spider-Men. And that's a major shame, because if you didn't know that they were coming back into it, I think it would have been fantastic when they just pop up. But unfortunately, they couldn't keep a lid on that one as well as they could with some of the stuff they did with the likes of Endgame. But in saying that, they still kept some things not spoiled, and some of the surprises in the movie hit really well, and the storytelling overall within the movie is just fantastic. From a nostalgia point of view, it was really cool seeing the other Spider-Man pop back, Andrew Garfield popping in. Wasn't a big fan of his movies, as I mentioned, mainly because I think the bad guys are pretty weak. The lizard guy was pretty weak. Electro was cool, but not sensational, and it's very clear that the best Spider-Man villains so far are from the Sam Raimi movies. One thing I thought was kind of stupid at times was the interaction between Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. Some of their dialogue was very, very cheesy and kind of made their characters seem like the stupider Spider-Man at the times. And again, they kind of wanted to elevate Tom Holland's character, be like, he's the smartest one, he's the best one, he's the one that's ultimately going to save the day. But he didn't need that validation. Everybody now knows Tom Holland's Spider-Man is fantastic. Spider-Man's fight scenes in the movie are pretty damn interesting. The one with Doc Ock when he first appears, and we get the use of the nanobots to take over Doc Ock's arms, is pretty damn funny. The fight with Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension. That was pretty damn cool, very, very interesting. And then ultimately we get the fight with all of the other villains, and that ultimately culminates with Doc Ock appearing beside Electro. It looks like he's going to be the big badass, and turns out he's still a good guy. And they did that really, really well in the movie to make the audience believe, oh shit, here comes Doc Ock. But he saves the day because he's still fixed somehow. But they very much make Green Goblin the main bad guy in this. As mentioned already, he kills off Aunt May, which is always a big thing for making one of your villains hated. It's one way they tried to make Kylo Ren a better bad guy in Star Wars, is they had him kill off Han Solo, because they believed that killing off a beloved character would make him more hated. But when it came to Star Wars The Last Jedi, he didn't pull the trigger to ultimately kill off Leia. But if he had have pulled the trigger and killed off Leia, one of the most beloved characters, as well as killing off Han Solo, that gives him major villain points, adds some real evil to him, and ultimately makes him a pretty damn good bad guy. The bad guys actually have to be evil in these movies. They have to kill off beloved characters. It's exactly what they do with Green Goblin in Spider-Man The No Way Home. The No Way Home? What the hell am I watching? That's exactly what they do in Spider-Man No Way Home. Green Goblin kills off a key character, a cornerstone for Spider-Man, a big character in Aunt May, and ultimately gets those villain points. It ultimately makes him a pretty damn good bad guy, and he was already a damn good bad guy in the first place. Willem Dafoe was fantastic in that role. All in all, through all the nostalgia, all the great action scenes, the scene in the rain looked fantastic when Tom Holland is upset after Aunt May dies, the characters getting killed off, the surprises in there. We ultimately end up with the final battle scene where Green Goblin and Tom Holland's Spider-Man face off, and Tom Holland just starts beating the hell out of him, showing every bit of aggression, and all of a sudden Tobey Maguire steps in and just stares at him blankly. It's kind of weird. He just keeps staring. I guess they were kind of trying to show that connection, but it kind of looked like he was trying to use mind powers at the same time. But it ultimately worked. Tom Holland calmed down a little bit, didn't beat the shit out of him as much, didn't kill him, because they had that moment where Tobey Maguire mentions killing the guy in his movie when Uncle Ben got killed and he hunted him down, killed him, didn't bring him satisfaction. The throwbacks to the other movies and stuff we've seen was pretty well done. The nostalgia level was at 100 in this one, but I loved a lot of it. My one concern with bringing back the other Spider-Man, and I've mentioned this before when I talked about Marvel, is that it might be abused by Marvel going forward. By which I mean Marvel could exploit this by saying these other versions of this same hero you know are just from a different universe. You know, they're from a different timeline. That's where I think we're ultimately going. We're going to get a new Iron Man. Could be Tom Cruise. Could be Brad Pitt. Could be some up-and-coming actor. And they'll be like, yeah, he's Iron Man as well, but from a different timeline. And that could be pretty bad and get pretty messy. I wouldn't be surprised at some point to see a Hulk movie or a Hulk series where we get Eric Bana and Ed Norton, although Ed Norton's probably still pissed off with the MCU. But you pay him enough money, you know, that anger's going to go away. Yeah, but something like the Hulk, they could easily bring back previous iterations of that. They could bring in new iterations of Black Widow and say she's from a different timeline. We'll get, who's a super woman? Jennifer Lawrence, no, she's already in it. Some actress. Why can't I think of an actress? Saoirse Ronan, why not? Throw her in there. But you get my point, it could get very messy there with the MCU. Hopefully they don't abuse it and they just use it sparingly. But the interesting thing with this movie was the post-credits scene, because we ultimately get a post-credits scene featuring Tom Hardy as Venom. And Venom, at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage, there was a post-credits scene, which I don't think I mentioned in my review of that movie, but there was a post-credits scene where he sees Tom Holland on a TV screen after he's like teleported to this resort thingy. And that could get very interesting. Spider-Man versus Venom, or with Venom. Who knows how it's going to go. Well, Venom's coming into the MCU, and that could be damn awesome. Even though I wasn't a big fan of Venom Let There Be Carnage, I was a pretty big fan of the first movie, and I think Tom Hardy is a damn good actor as well. That could be an interesting little partnership going forward, and it'll be interesting to see how they introduce Venom into the MCU. Good guy, bad guy. Who knows? But for me, Spider-Man No Way Home hit all the right marks. It hit my expectations spot on. I really enjoyed the movie from start to finish. The pacing was pretty strong. The last 5-10 minutes slows down considerably. The opening 10 minutes could have been a little bit faster. But some of the action within the core of the story was fantastic. The storytelling, the chemistry between the actors, especially the likes of Zendaya and Tom Holland, you can really see their connection there, and it works really well on screen. And for me, this is one of the best MCU movies I've watched in a long, long time. I did say something similar about Shang-Chi, that was one of the more original movies, but this is definitely a step above. And while I'm still not overexcited for the main MCU timeline, and think it is going to get pretty messy going forward. I'm not even a big fan of Doctor Strange coming up. I think that's going to get the most messy of all the movies. Some movies in the MCU still grab my attention. Spider-Man will always grab my attention. Thor is similar as well. When the next Thor movie comes out, I'm going to be all over that one. I'm sure that's going to be fantastic. So there is still some life in the MCU. So ultimately, we get down to a rating for Spider-Man No Way Home. And for me, I've mentioned I loved the movie. I thought it was fantastic in places, and I was enthralled all the way through. So for me, the movie is going to get a 9 out of 10, the highest rating I've given this year. Although it is the middle of January, so that's not really saying much, but damn good movie.